You'll also find that you can step through the tabs in each group by pressing the Style Select buttons repeatedly, just as with the Sound Select and Performance Select buttons. I mentioned earlier that if you are using a split keyboard, you can have the chord scanning assigned to the lower or to the upper of the split. This means that if you want to, you could play chords with your right hand and, for example, a live bass part with your left. First of all, I'm going to select Manual Bass. This mutes the bass part in the style and allows me to play my own bass part to the lower of the split using the same sound as used in the style. Then I'm going to set the chord scanning to upper, which means that the chords I play to the upper of the split will be used as the harmony source for the style. I'm going to use Modern Beat and play a chord sequence but with a left-hand bass part instead of the style bass part. In that example, I was able to play what is called on-bass notes, which are the notes that are not the root note of the chord. Very often you'll see a chord symbol written like this, which means play a G chord with a B bass. Using the manual bass procedure, it was easy for me to do that, but you can actually do the same thing even if the style is playing the bass. Turn on bass inversion, and then the lowest note of the chord that you play will determine the bass note rather than the root note of the chord. I want to play a G chord in its root position, that is with the G root note at the bottom. You can hear that the bass note is centered around G. Now listen as I play the first inversion G chord where B is the lowest note. Now you can hear the bass note is playing a B note. Using this system requires some practice and of course knowledge of inversions, but it's really fun to use and makes your music more authentic and enjoyable. There's one more chord scanning option that I'd like to tell you about, which is great for piano players. Set the keyboard mode to full upper, and upper and lower chord scanning will be selected automatically. Now you can play anywhere on the keyboard with two hands, and the PA800 will work out what chord you're playing. The PA800 has 5 modes of chord recognition. To change the chord recognition mode, simply touch the split tab and across to chord recognition. As you can see, we have 5 modes of chord recognition, including 1 finger and 3 different fingered modes. But full keyboard chord scanning really works best with the expert chord recognition mode. It's really great for playing jazz. I'm going to play a short piece using a swing style with just bass, drums and rhythm guitar accompanying my piano, and look out for some advanced jazz chords along the way. Just as with the real-time tracks, you can alter the balance of the style tracks. Actually, there are many more ways to edit styles than we have time to look at here, but let's have a look at a couple of simple things. For starters, you can alter the volume of each style track. You can also easily mute any track. You can even change the sound used in a track. Just touch the little instrument icon and choose a new sound, just as we did for the real-time tracks. There are several ways to store this setting, but perhaps the most straightforward is by storing it as part of a performance, as in Chapter 3. Notice that after I changed the sound, the original style sounds checkbox was unchecked. To get back to the original sounds, simply check the box again. If you want to play without worrying about setting up your PA800, then single touch settings are the perfect feature for you. What single touch settings does is to set up your PA800 for you with suitable sound selections in all of the real-time tracks matched to the style you're using. Simply select a style, press single touch setting 1 and play. To change registration while you're playing, just press another single touch setting. If you turn on the single touch button that's linked to the style select buttons, the first single touch setting for each style will be selected automatically. And pressing the single touch button again so that it flashes will make the 4 single touch settings change automatically with the style variation, really turning your performance into an arrangement. You can add percussion hits, musical phrases and loops to your performance simply by touching one of the 4 pads. You'll find that suitable pads are selected automatically to match the style you're using. As a guide, pad 1 is usually percussion, pad 2 is piano or a keyboard part, pad 3 is guitar, and pad 4 is used for anything appropriate. Of course, if a style needs something different, this guide won't apply. Now I'm going to select Fast Bossa 2 and introduce these pads while the style is playing. Some of these pads loop continuously during playback, which for tune instruments works like adding another accompaniment part. Let's try 3. Of course, you can change the pads yourself, and a good shortcut to the pad menu is just to press and hold the Shift button and touch any pad. Now, if you have several pads playing back and they're looping, you can stop any one of them by holding down stop and selecting that pad. Now if you want to stop everything, go ahead and just press stop. There are single hits such as drum and percussion and effects, and short sequences in many different categories, so experiment. There are many ways to play using styles, and so you don't have to keep setting up your PA800 every time you use it. You can set your preferences for how it should work. When you're in style play mode, just press the menu button and touch Preferences in the screen. I'm going to select the Style Setup tab and look at some of the options available there. There are a couple of options that deal with what happens when you switch the PA800 on. As we saw in Chapter 3, the same buttons on the panel are used for Performance Select and Sound Select, and you just need to change their function with the buttons on the front panel. Usually when you switch on the PA800, it powers up with the performance select enabled but with the style change disabled. But you can change this in this preferences screen so that the style change will also be enabled when you switch on the PA800. Then when you change performance memory, the style will also change to the one saved with each memory, as we saw in Chapter 3. But you might want the PA800 to power up with the sound select enabled, and you have that option to change to performance select later. In that case, just change performance to sound default in this performance sound default. To store your preferences, just touch the pull down screen in the top right hand corner here and go ahead and write global style setup. Touch OK and confirm by pressing yes. There are many other preferences to check out, so as you become more familiar with the PA800, you'll be able to adjust its setup to your exact needs. In the next chapter we'll look at the song play mode, but I first want to tell you about a feature which is very useful for both the style play and song play modes. Now in style play mode you'll find that each style automatically sets its own tempo, and there might be a retard on the intro or ending. A standard MIDI file song, of course, will usually have its own tempo track and might even vary in tempo as it plays. Now if you want to stop this happening in both cases, just go ahead and turn on tempo lock. Some MIDI file songs have incredibly complex tempo tracks that would take a long time to edit, so being able to just disable it at the touch of a button is a great feature. In the case of styles, you might want to change from one style to another during your performance. Now normally the tempo would change with those different styles, like this. See, that's slowed down. Let's try it now with tempo lock on. All perfectly in time with tempo lock. So far we've looked at real-time tracks and style tracks, which leaves one to discuss: song tracks. To use the PA800 to play back standard MIDI files, the first thing to do is to press the song play mode button. In song play mode, it's assumed that you want to play it live over a standard MIDI file backing, so you'll see the usual real-time track volume sliders on the screen. But if you press the track select button, you can see song tracks 1 through 8, press it again, 9 through 16. If you press the track select button repeatedly, it will simply cycle around those 3 pages, so you can get to the tracks that you want to adjust very easily. The PA800 actually has 2 independent sequences, which is great for live performances. For example, if you're playing for people dancing and you need to keep the music going, you can even be loading a song into the second sequencer while the other one is playing. You can then crossfade between the 2 songs. First, let's look at how to load up a song. Now, there are 2 choices of where you can store songs, either in internal memory or on an external storage medium such as a USB flash drive. You could even use a USB floppy disk drive if you have lots of songs on floppy, but I really recommend copying them over to a more modern and quick medium. To connect an external storage medium, you can either use the USB host port on the front right key cheek or the USB host port on the back panel. Examples of the kinds of storage devices you could connect are USB hard drives, a USB flash drive, or a USB CD drive. USB flash drives are especially convenient because they are very small, easy to connect, and available with very large capacities. I've copied